We all know that WordPress is a very powerful web design software package. It has tons of options available, but sometimes you just want to go beyond what it offers. Today, we're going to be taking advanced custom fields and we're going to be using that to enhance what WordPress can do. The nice thing is, this is the free version and we're going to be using this in conjunction with Elementor Pro. Now, Elementor Pro gives us the ability to create custom theme files and we can then fine-tune and tweak to get something that's a little bit more unique. Now, if you think this is beyond you, don't worry because I'm going to take you through every single step in this beginner's guide. So by the time you've finished, you're going to have a good basic understanding of how advanced custom fields and Elementor Pro work in conjunction with each other. Once you've done that, if you want to learn more, there's tons of videos on this channel. I'll put a link in the description below and a card up in the corner right now so you can take a look at those when you finish this and move on to get even more complex, powerful WordPress websites. Well, my name's Paul C. This is WPTuts, the channel where I help you get more from WordPress. If this is your first time on the channel, please consider subscribing and smashing that bell icon below to become part of the WP crew and be notified every time new content is added. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is jump over onto the computer, open the dashboard up in WordPress and take a look at the tools we're going to be using for this particular beginner's guide. I've already gone ahead and downloaded and installed Advanced Custom Fields, Elementor and Elementor Pro. Now with Advanced Custom Fields installed, let's take a quick look at the Custom Fields options, a brief overview if you will. If we take a look on the left hand side now, we have Custom Fields and inside there we have 3 options. If you have the Pro version, you'll have an additional option that just says license, which you can go in, put in your serial number, and then you can have access to any of the updates of the Pro version as and when they actually come out. For the free version, we just get 3. We've got field groups and we've got add new. Now field groups will just list all of the custom field groups that we've created. And what a field group really is a way of grouping together the custom meta fields that we're going to create. So let's take a look at add new. And what that'll do is that'll allow us to go in and start creating our first ACF field groups. Now the screen is broken down into 4 distinct sections and we'll cover each one of these in more detail as we go through setting up our first set of fields. You can see at the top we've got the title, which we can put in the name of this particular field group. So naming these to make sense, a logical kind of naming system is going to be something that's very useful to you if you create more complex sites in the future. Next up, we've got the actual fields themselves, and this is where we create the different kinds of field types. So we've got things like text fields, image fields, file upload fields, and a whole range of different options as part of ACF. After that, we've got the location settings. Now these are rules that we can set up to specify exactly where our custom fields are going to be listed. So we've got a range of different places we can do this. We can choose from post types, templates, formats, categories, user roles, forms, a whole range of different things that we can use to trigger where we use these particular field groups. Next, we've got the sort of qualifier. Is it equal to or is it not equal to? And then finally, what we actually check it against. So things like post, page, template. And these will change depending upon what kind of thing you choose. So for example, if we say post category, you'll see that changes now and we'll have things like uncategorized. And if we create additional post categories or your taxonomy, if you want to call it that, these will be listed inside there. So depending upon what you choose in the first option, will dictate what you'll see in the last option. And like I say, we will come back and take a look at how we can set some of these up as we go through and create our first field group. Next, we've got the settings section, and this is where you can fine-tune and configure exactly where and how you want ACF to interact with WordPress. So you can see we can make this field group active or we can deactivate it. This just means you can create field groups and then you can deactivate them if you don't want to use them, or you can then reactivate them as and when you need to. We've then got things like the style, which allows us to choose whether you want to have standard, which is your WordPress meta boxes, or if you want seamless integration. These are more visual than actually sort of technical. It's just how they actually show up on the page that you're using them on. Next, we've got the position. Do you want them normal after the content, high after the title, or at the side, so you have that on the right-hand side of your actual page? Next up, we've got the label placement. So if you're using labels when you create your meta fields, you can have control over exactly where these are listed. Are they top aligned or left aligned? Then we've got the instruction placement. So if you apply instructions to more complex fields that you may create as part of your field group, you can put some instructions inside there, and then you can dictate exactly where these will be displayed inside the actual dashboard. Order number just specifies where they'll be listed down the left hand side inside the hierarchy of your dashboard. And then description, which will again show up inside the left-hand side section. And finally, we have the hide on screen options. When you create custom post types, for example, or you integrate this into an existing post type as part of WordPress, you can control exactly what is or isn't going to be displayed. This gives you a more granular control over making sure that you don't have information inside your custom post or inside your posts with use the sort of metadata that we're going to create inside ACF. You can control exactly what's displayed and what's not displayed. So this can be very useful if you want to keep things very, very simple, if you're offloading this to a client or they don't have access or need for any of these options. We'll take a look at some of these as we go through, and we'll change and configure things, and I'll show you exactly how some of these display. But for now, that's the overview of exactly how you create your custom meta fields inside ACF. Now that we've seen what field groups are, let's create our first field group in ACF and let's associate that with posts. Now what we're going to do for this example is keep it pretty straightforward, but we're going to use it as a good example of how you can enhance what's already inside WordPress with ACF fields. We're going to use the example of creating some additional information about vehicles, and we're going to associate that then with our posts. So what we're going to do first of all is give this a name, and we're just going to say vehicle details. Now this is more for you than for anything else. This isn't going to be displayed on the front end of the website. This is just so you know exactly what this particular field group is associated with. Great if you are using just one or two field groups, it's not so important. But if you build more complex sites, it makes sense to get into a naming convention that makes it very clear and obvious what every single field group actually relates to. Now we've done that. Before we move on and start actually putting in the fields we want to use, let's tell it where we want to use it by using the location option. Now at the top, we've got post types, post template, status, and so on. For this, we're just going to simply come in and say post type. Then we're going to say is equal to, and if we click to expand that out, even though it says post type, we've got pages and templates and fonts and icon sets and so on. However, we know we want to associate this with a post, so we're just going to click on post and leave that as it is. Very, very simple rule. So now anytime we create a new post, these custom fields will be associated and available to us. If we wanted to get even further in control of this, we could use additional options inside our location rules, or we could use rule groups. However, that's a little beyond what I want to cover in this beginner's guide to using ACF with WordPress. Next up, we're going to come down to the settings section, and primarily we're going to leave almost everything intact. We don't need to worry too much about this. However, we will come back a little later and I'll show you how some of these actually influence the way things are laid out inside your post editor. For now, we'll leave them as they are. So there's the first part done. We've named this, we've set the location up where we want to use it, and any settings we may think we need to apply. The next thing we need to do is start adding in the fields. Now, this is very easy. All we need to do is click on add field, and that'll open up a range of options. Now this is very context based, so depending upon the field type that you choose, you'll see different options open up below. So before we start filling anything in, let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about. At the moment, text is set up and you can see we've got things like default value, placeholder text, prepend, append, and so on. However, if we come down and we choose something like file, you'll see that now opens up a range of different options. So we've got things like return value, file array, file URL, file ID. All these things sound quite complicated, but the reality is it's just how the data is going to be stored inside the database, inside ACF. So don't worry too much about this. I'll explain some of these as we go through, and then you take a look at some of the more advanced videos that we've got. Once you've kind of got a good understanding of how ACF works, you'll see these being used in different contexts throughout some of those videos. So if you are interested in this, take a look at those further videos and see exactly how you can start to utilize these various different options. So for now, let's put this back to text. And what we're going to do is we're going to give the field a label. Now the label is basically the name that's going to be displayed inside your editor, your post editor. So we want this to be nice, clear, plain English. So we'll just say vehicle manufacturer. If we click then into the next field, that's the field name. Now this is automatically generated. You can, if you want to, change that to anything whatsoever. The only thing you have to make sure that you do is you don't leave any spaces between any of the words that you use. Either use an underscore or use a dash. There always has to be something like that in there, otherwise you will encounter problems. Then like I say, we've got the field type. Instructions, let's just put something really simple in here just so I can demonstrate how this is going to be displayed. So we'll just say insert vehicle manufacturer. There we go. We'll just correct that spelling mistake. There we go. Is this required? We'll say yes, because obviously if we're going to put a vehicle in there, we want to make sure that vehicle manufacturer is included in there. Then we've got default value. Do we want to put a default value inside here? Well, no, because we don't know what the vehicle is going to be. But in some instances, you may want to have a default value. Placeholder text, all that really means is it'll put some placeholder text into this particular field type, which will be replaced as soon as you type anything in there. It's also worth bearing in mind, it's only placeholder text. It won't be added to the database if you don't put anything in there. Prepend just basically means something that appears before the input, and append is something that appears after. So you could have something like the pound sign or the dollar sign for beforehand, or you could have a unit of measurement to be afterwards with using the append option. Character limit, if you want to limit this to a set number of characters, you can do that. If you leave it blank, there's no limit. And then we've got conditional logic. Now, I'm not going to go into conditional logic, but I will give you a quick overview of what it actually is. Now, you can have multiple different field types inside here, and you can use conditional logic to display or hide them based upon whatever criteria you want to set. So if we click on conditional logic, you can see we get something that looks very familiar to what we had at the top, where we choose exactly what we want to actually display this particular post type. But this is only going to work on a field level. So this particular field, if we match any of the criteria, we can either display it or hide it. I hope that makes sense. So you can see show field if, and we click on there, and you can see at the moment we don't really have anything in there. But when you start to get extra fields in there, we can reference those to specify whether something is hidden or shown. So we may say that we wanted a year of manufacture, and then once you put that year of manufacture in, if it meets a certain criteria, another field may pop up that's specific to a vehicle that was only manufactured after that year. Anything that's prior to that wouldn't be displayed. Again, like I say, I hope that makes sense. Then we've got the qualifier, which would basically be how do you want to compare the values, and then finally the value at the end of it. So that's the basics of conditional logic, and like I say, that's beyond what I want to cover in this beginner's primer. Let's just turn that off, and then we've got wrapper attributes. If you want to, you can set some attributes inside here, then you could reference those with CSS and other things just to make sure that if you wanted to customize any of the fields that you create inside ACF, you can do that by using the wrapper attributes. Okay, so there's our first field. We can click at the top to hide that, and we can say, let's add another field in. So this time we're going to say vehicle color. Again, we click down in the field name, you can see it automatically puts in that underscore. Field type, we can leave that as is. Instructions, we'll just say vehicle color. Correct that spelling. Required, yes. Default value, all those kinds of things, we're going to leave those as they are. So that's some basic text fields. Let's take a look at adding a different field type in. I'm going to add a new field, and this time we're going to say vehicle, and we're going to say engine. Let go underneath. This time we're going to change this now. We want them to be able to pick what engine type it is, whether it's a diesel, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's a petrol, you name it, we can sort of add that in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and change this from text. I'm going to come down, and you can see we've got things like checkbox, select, and so on. We're going to say select. Once we do that, we now get some different options. Instructions, if we want to put that in, again, we can drop instructions in there. We're going to say we want this to be required. And then we've got the choices. And you can see we can do it in one of two ways. We can put a choice, and we can have a value, and we can have a label if we wanted to. So we could say we want this to be petrol. And then we can put a space, a full colon, and then we can put petrol at the end of it. Now, this is obviously the kind of thing you're thinking, well, if we choose petrol or diesel or something, we don't need to have a label and a value. However, there's going to be instances where you do. You may have the label to be a sort of shortened version, and you could have the value you want to insert to be a long version, or you could have something like it could be text for the actual label with numeric or something like that for the value. So it's up to you how you want to set this up. If you're using the same values for everything, you can, if you want to, simply just put in the one value like so. Which is what we're going to do. I'm going to click underneath, and we're going to put diesel in, we'll put hybrid, and we'll put electric. So we've now created our values. Underneath that, you can see we've got default value. Each default value put it on a new line. So if you want to put default values in, you can do that if you want to. You can also do things like allow null. So we're going to say no to that. Select multiple values, again, no. Stylized UI, doesn't really matter for this example. It's more a case of just demonstrating how this works. Then we've got the return format. So this is a case of, do we want to use the value, the label, or both of those? So you may want to store one or the other, or you may want to store both in your database. Various different reasons why you'd want to do that. We're just going to simply set this to be the label. Conditional logic, we don't need that, and we're not going to worry about wrapper attributes either. So we're going to close this down. I'm going to do one final field type. So we're going to say add field, and we're just going to put in vehicle specifications. Click underneath, and then we can choose the field type. So we're going to click to expand this out. And what we're going to do is we want to have a WYSIWYG editor. In other words, what you see is what you get. So you can get all the normal things like bold, italic, underline, the basic kind of editor you get inside WordPress itself. So what we can do is we can come down and say WYSIWYG editor. Click on there, and you can see now we get some different options again. So we've set it to be required. Now we can set up how do we want this to be used. Do we want to have it fully featured, or do we want to have a very stripped down basic version? So you can see we've got the tabs, visual and text. So we may only want to have this set up to be visual only, or visual and text, or text only. Now these are just basically, can you see like the HTML code behind it, or do you want to be able to just sort of see visual text only? Entirely up to you. We're going to leave this visual and text. The toolbar then is, do we want to have the full featured version, so all of the options are available, or do we want to keep this a little bit more basic? We'll say basic. Then we've got the option, say, show media upload buttons. What this means is, do we want to allow people to upload things like images, PDF files, Word files, things like that as part of it? Will it show the media button? We'll say yes for this example. Delay initialization. Now, tiny MCE, in other words, this is the little visual editor you're using, is not initialized until the field is clicked on. This is going to mean that you end up with a slightly quicker load time and you don't have the clutter of that in there. We're going to leave that to no because I want this just to load in straight away. Other than that, everything else is now in place. So we've created our 4 new custom field types as part of our vehicle details. There's one thing I want to draw your attention to before we go any further. You'll notice that every single one of these labels and the names that I use are all prepended with vehicle and then underscore. Now, I always tend to get into this habit because it means if I want to reference one of these later on and I can't think exactly what I've called it, I'll know that if this is vehicle something, or it'll be sort of painting something or book something, I always use that at the beginning to dictate exactly what's going on. So it just means that I'll know that my naming convention just makes it easier further down the line when I want to reference anything like this, because I always use it by using it something like vehicle underscore, book underscore, recipe underscore. Always starts with exactly what that particular field set is all about. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so now everything is in place. We're going to click on publish, and we've now created our first field group as part of Advanced Custom Fields. Now, if we want to view any of our field groups, we can come back over to the field groups listing, and that will show us anything we've got inside there. Now, the other thing I want to draw your attention to is it says currently vehicle details. Now, that's kind of pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes that may not always be the case. Now, we can make our lives just a little bit easier by adding something extra in. So let's come back in and edit these vehicle details, this field group. Scroll down to our settings section. And we saw previously you've got description. Well, what we can do is we can put in a little brief description there. And let me just show you what that does. So we can say, whatever we want to call this. Just say, list new vehicle details. So we'll just save this again, update that. And we'll come back out to our field groups. And you'll see now we get the name of this particular field group, but we also get this little description at the end of it, which just means identifying what all these different field groups actually relate to can become a lot easier. So that's just something that I think is a little visual thing that makes life just that little easier, and is something worth taking advantage of on more complex websites that use ACF. So now that we've created our first field group, let's take a look at what it's done to our posts. So we come into our posts on the left-hand side, and we'll come down to all posts. Anything we have will be listed inside here, and you can see we've got the typical hello world. So let's add a new post in, and once we do that, this will open up, and you can see we've now got the normal editor section at the top, which is part of Gutenberg, but we also now have all our custom fields listed below. So vehicle manufacturer, vehicle color, the vehicle engine, which is our drop-down list, which we can pick and choose whatever we want from. And then finally, we've got our vehicle specifications, which is our WYSIWYG editor with the add media option, the visual and the text options, and also the slimmed down version of the options that we have as part of the visual editor. So it's simple to include these into the design itself, into your post types. So we've now created that. Next thing we're going to do is take a look at creating some content inside there, and taking a look at how we can go back and fine tune and tweak this to make sure that we end up with a great looking setup inside our posts using ACF. Before we take a look at actually setting some of these settings up, it's worth bearing in mind that if you use Gutenberg as your editor in WordPress, some of these options really don't have any effect. However, if you're using the classic editor, you should have more success. So just bear that in mind. Depending upon what editor you use, you may have mixed results. Now, if we take a look, we can do things like, let's just say we want to take the label placement and the instruction placement as an example. So let's just say, to start off with, what it looks like is like this. You can see we've got everything listed out underneath. So that's all pretty sort of seamless and straightforward. However, we can, if we want to, just change things like to left aligned, and we'll say below fields. So this will change our label placement and change the layout structure. So we now come back in and refresh this. We get a slightly different layout. So you can see now we've got the details on the left hand side. We've got the instructions now sit below the field entries. So you can fine tune and tweak this if you want to. Come back out, we'll set those back to the original values. And what we can do, we could just say we want our content position to be on the side. So if you have small content areas and you don't want to sort of make your entire interface sort of looking really complex, you could put the position to the side. And then what that'll do is it'll put your new custom fields inside the right hand column, inside your dashboard, inside your post editor. So you can see now we've got our vehicle details on the right hand side, whereas previously they were underneath this area. So it's up to you how you want to lay things out, and obviously depends upon the content and the way that you want to work. So like I say, just bear in mind that if you're using Gutenberg, you may find you have some slight differences in the way that everything is displayed. Now in this section, we're going to be taking a look at how we create the single post template, which will output the information to do with the actual vehicle that we're talking about. Now we're going to be using the Hello theme for this because it's a kind of blank theme that works really well with Elementor. It means we don't have to worry too much about all the extra bits and pieces that a typical theme will bring along with it. So with that being said, let's take a look at what we're currently working with. If we click through, we take a look at a typical single post. Now this is the details of an individual post. All you can see we've got is the title, we've got the basic information and the leave a reply option underneath it. So we don't really have much to work with. So we need to rectify this. We need to go in and create that new template. So we come back into our dashboard. When I come down to the template section, we're going to come into theme builder. Now, if you're new to working with the theme builder inside Elementor Pro, it's not as complex as it may first seem. You start off by breaking your themes down into various different components. So if you think of a typical page inside WordPress, you'll have a header, which will have your menu, your logo, and so on. You'll have your footer, which could have additional links, copyright information, and so on. Then you actually have the content of the page itself that sits in between the header and the footer. Now that content can take on many different forms. In this example, we have two different things that we can deal with. We've got the single, which is where you click through and take a look at an actual individual post. And you've got the archive, and the archive lists all the posts in a particular section. So first of all, let's take a look at dealing with the single post. Now we'll take a look at the archive and how we can quickly use Elementor Pro to make a more custom archive. So when we're in the theme builder, all we need to do is click on single. Inside there, that'll give us the option now to create our first single post type. So we're going to click on add single, and in there we've got the options to specify some basic information. You can see if we select this option first of all, if we chose single by mistake, we could, if we wanted to, choose a different type of template from page, section, pop-up, and so on. Single is perfectly fine for this example. Then it says select the post type. So we click on there and you can see we can choose between three individual values: posts, pages, and the 404 page. We don't want to worry about pages at this point, we just want to concentrate on posts. Now, if this is something you'd like to learn more about, I've got a completely dedicated video on exactly how to use the theme builder as part of Elementor Pro, and I'd recommend taking a look at that if you want to learn more about all the different nuances you have inside this particular page builder and the theme options that are associated with it. I'll put a link in the description below and in the corner so you can take a look at that. So let's just choose post. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to give this template a name, and we're going to call this default single. So we'll know now this is the default template that's going to be used for all of our single post types. So we're going to say create template, and that'll then take us through into the Elementor editor where we can choose from blocks, pages, and any templates we may have created ourselves. We're not going to worry about using anything from here. We're going to start completely from scratch. So we're going to close this down. And we'll end up then basically with a blank template. Now, if you're wondering what this ACF for beginners at the top is, because we haven't associated a header and a footer yet as part of our themes, this is just basically the name of the site. So we can rectify that, and we'll take a look at that after we've created this single post template. Okay, so because we've chosen a single template, single post template, you can see we now have 8 options on the left-hand side grouped together under single. Now, Elementor Pro is smart enough to know that if you're dealing with a single post type, you're probably going to want to use some of these, if not all of these. Let's just do exactly that. First thing we want to do is choose the featured image. So we can simply come over, drag in the featured image widget, drop that on there, and that will pre-fill out the information from one of our posts. Now, if you find you're not seeing what you expect, or you want to change it to a different post, you can do that incredibly easily. All we need to do is come down to the bottom left-hand side, choose settings from the little cog icon, and in there you can see we've got preview settings. If we click and expand that out, first option we have is what dynamic content we want to use to preview. If we click and expand that out, you can see again we've got posts, page, media, 404, and so on. Now, if you are creating custom post types, you may see additional things inside here. And also, if you're dealing with things like if you install WooCommerce, again, you'll see different options available in association with what we have here. We're going to choose post, that's perfectly fine. Now, currently, we're looking at the Audi TT, but let's just say we wanted to change that to the focus that we inserted in here. You can see we've got forward focus. We can say apply and preview, and that'll just update the preview. Now, bear in mind, this is just the preview. Nothing more. This is just there to make your designing the single post template or the archive templates a lot easier, because you can actually see some data inside there. Okay, so there's our vehicle. Let's come down and say we want to drag in the post title. So we'll drop that underneath there. And you can see we've now pulled in forward focus. We're going to come in and we're going to come back out. We're going to say we want to put in the actual post content. Now, this is all really, really simple and straightforward, because we're just using normal simple parts of a typical page or typical post: your title, the featured image, and the actual description itself, or the content. But how do we go about pulling in that ACF data? That's not quite so straightforward. That's a little bit more complex, surely. Well, not really. What we can do is come back out of this, and we're going to just say we want to put in some additional information underneath here. We've got all the options we normally expect to have, things like headings, text editor, images, and so on, and we can reference that information. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to pull in a heading, drop that underneath there, and you can see we've got this dynamic option for both title and the link and various other sections depending upon the widget that we choose. Once we've got that, we can use that to reference the advanced custom fields data. So we've got this filler text in it at the moment, but we want to change that for dynamic content. So let's click on dynamic, and you see that now opens up a range of extra options. We've also got things in there like post date, post excerpt, and so on. So these kind of mimic what you have with those normal single post widgets. And if you wanted to, you could use either or. However, we've also got extra things. If we scroll down, you can see at the bottom, we've got ACF and ACF field. Well, let's click on ACF field, and nothing happens. So why doesn't anything happen? Well, basically because all we've done so far is tell it we want to put an ACF field in there. We haven't told it what field we actually want to use. So what we need to do that is click on the little wrench icon, and that will open up then 2 different sections. We've got the key, which is basically the ACF field name that we want to reference, and advanced. And what the advanced does is it allows us to put some information before, after, or a default fallback value in there. So first of all, let's deal with the settings. Let's just come in and choose the key that we want to use. If we click on there, you can see we have our 4 options available. Now, one thing to bear in mind is you will only see different options inside here for the key that are associated or will work with the widget that you're using. So for example, if we put some image upload fields in here, we wouldn't see those referenced inside the key because we can't use those with a heading section, with a heading widget. So logic would dictate that you'll only see the relevant information you can pull in that's associated with the typical type of widget that you're working with. Okay, hope that makes sense. So what we're going to do is pull in manufacturer. Once we've done that, you can see that now pulls in Ford. Great. But what does Ford mean? You know, if someone's looking at this, it might mean absolutely nothing to them. Well, this is where the advanced options come in. So what we can do is we can put in something before. So let's just say we want to put manufacturer, and we put a full colon and a space. Give it a second or so, and you can see that now updates. If you wanted to put something else in there, like fallback, for example, so if a value wasn't inserted into this field, we'll just put in something like NA, so it's non-applicable. If you wanted to put something after, you could do that. So let's just say something. Give it a second or so, and you can see that now updates, and we'll put after what we put into the key, that puts that in there as well. So we can put before, we can put after, we can do pretty much whatever we want in there. And like I say, if we want to, we can use HTML code inside here. So if we wanted to make this bold, we could just wrap this in strong tags. However, like I say, we're not worried about that. So there's the first one we've done. So we've put in that ACF field. We've associated that with the relevant key field we want to use, all pretty simple and straightforward. So now we can just kind of repeat that same process again if we want to. So what we could say is we could duplicate this, which would be a quick way of doing it, and we would only have to go in and just change what the value is for the key. So let's do that. Let's just right click and just say duplicate. And then we can come up here, we can click on the little wrench icon, we can change that from vehicle, or we can just change this to vehicle color. And we'll just change the before, and we'll put in color. Give that a second so, and there you go. We've now updated that information. So I'll repeat that again. So we just right click, duplicate, come into the little wrench icon, change that from color, we'll say vehicle engine. I'll come in, change this to engine type. And there we go. So all very simple and straightforward. So the final one we've got then is the specifications. We're going to do this a little differently. We're going to come in and we're going to say, first of all, we want to put in a different heading inside there. So we can come into there and we'll just put in, we'll say specifications. That's the heading for that created. Now what we can do is we can come in and we'll say we want to put a text editor underneath there. So that's our different widget this time. But again, you can see we've got dynamic as an option. So we can click on dynamic, scroll right the way to the bottom, choose ACF field, click on the wrench icon, and we'll change the key to vehicle specifications. Give it a second or so, and you can see that now updates the specifications. So what you can see is the whole process isn't particularly complex. But now what we can do is we can go ahead and we can fine tune and we can adjust the styling on there. So we can say we want to bring this in and make it a bit more in keeping. So H1 is perfectly fine on there. So we'll come into our style settings. What we'll do is we'll set that to be a different color. We'll change our typography and we'll just put in, we'll choose quicksand for this example, and we'll just adjust the size on there. And what we can do is we can adjust the weight if we want to. We can set up any way that we want to do that. Now what I can do is I can just sort of copy that. I could duplicate and paste that style there, paste that style there, paste there, and paste there. So that'll just update the styling on there, and we can style this any way we want. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the whole styling options because when it comes to dealing with this, it's very subjective, but also very easy with Elementor. So we'll say that we're happy with this template, that everything is in place. We'll hit publish, and that now opens up some options for us. Now these options are just literally conditions for when and where we use this new template. Now we're keeping this really, really simple, so I don't want to go into too much detail. And like I say, I've covered this in its own dedicated tutorial, so I would definitely recommend taking a look at the theme builder tutorial if you want to learn more about that. What we're going to do is we can say we've got include or exclude, and then we can choose where we want to use it. So at the moment it says posts, and as you can see, if we expand that, we have lots of different options. Because we've only set up a really simple setup, posts is perfectly fine. What you can do then is you could say you want to assign this to all posts or to specific posts. Once we're happy with that, we'll say save and close, and we've now created our single post template that'll be referenced and used for our particular website. So let's come back out now to that test page that we started off with, and this is where we were first of all with the normal hello theme. Now if we refresh this page, we'll find there's our new design with all the details that we've just put in there. So the name of the vehicle, the details, the manufacturer, all those kinds of good things are used inside there. So that's how we go about creating the single post template. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at how we can create an archive template and make everything just a little bit neater and a little bit sleeker. Now at the moment, this is what our archive page looks like. As you can see, it doesn't really give too much information away and it doesn't look that good. So how do we go about sort of changing that and making it a little bit more stylish? Well, again, we're going to come back into Elementor. We're going to close out of our previous dashboard section. We're going to come into our template section again, and we're going to come in and say theme builder. And from there, we're going to just choose archive. So once we've done that, we're going to go through the same kind of process as we did last time to create the single post template. Add new. I'm going to call this default archive and say create template. That's going to load us into Elementor Pro Editor and also take us into the blocks and the pages section. So if we wanted to use one of the predefined, pre-designed layouts, we could do that. But again, I'd rather show you from scratch. So let's close this down. What we're going to do, you can see again, because we chose an archive, we now have the archive section available on the left-hand side. So this makes it really easy. What we're going to do is we're going to just pull in the archive posts and drop that in there. Now what that's going to do is that's going to use the normal default WordPress loop. And what that really means is it's just going to loop through all the different posts that you've got. And that'll display that inside here. And we then control various different aspects of this and styling options and so on. So you can see at the top, we've got skin as an option. So we can click on there and we can choose between classic and cards. So we can see cards and you can see that now changes the design on there. If we want to, we can go through now and choose exactly what we do and don't want to show as part of this archive. So let's just say image is perfectly fine. We're going to choose the larger image because it looks a little better quality wise. Title is perfectly fine. We're going to come down. We're going to say we don't want to worry about comments and we don't want to worry about date. And you can see that now removes those from there in real time. Read more. We're going to get rid of that as well. The taxonomy is what you can see currently it says uncategorized. So if you were using different categories, you could have those listed as part of this archive. We're going to turn those off and we're going to turn the avatar off as well. So we've now got a really simple, clean looking setup for our archive page. I would recommend putting pagination on and enabling that just to make sure that when you get more vehicles or more posts on there, your user has some way of moving through to the next page of archive pages and so on and so forth. So we'll say, yeah, that's perfectly fine. We say numbers and previous and next. And again, if we want to, we can style that. Now you're not seeing anything because obviously there's nothing actually on here to see at the moment. So we'll say that we're happy with the way that looks. We'll say publish. And again, we're taken through to that condition section. So we'll say add a condition and you can see pretty much works the same way, but obviously because we're dealing with an archive, then the condition that's going to be used is going to be slightly different. So at the moment it says all archives, and we click to expand that, you can see we have a different set of ways of going through and specifying exactly what archive this would be used on. Now for me, I'm perfectly fine with all archives, but obviously, like I say, if you wanted to go through and specify different ones for categories, for child categories and so on, or tags, you can do that inside here. And again, all these things are covered in a lot more detail in that tutorial that'll take you through and show you how to use the Elementor Pro theme builder. So we say all archives. We'll hit save and close, and we've now created our custom archive. So let's come back over to our website, and because we set this for all the archives, anything that uses an archive page will now use our custom built template. So let's click to refresh, and there's our custom template being used. If we click and go through, there's our custom template being used for the single post type. So we've now not only created custom archives and custom single post templates, we've also pulled in data from advanced custom fields, and we can keep on repeating that to create far more complex and comprehensive websites using just these basic skills. Now, before we wrap up this particular section, let's just come back into our editor. I'm going to close out of this and I'll show you how easy it is just to set a header and a footer for your site. So again, inside the theme builder, we're going to come into there. We're going to choose header this time. Say add new header. We're just going to call this default header and create our template. Once we've done that, we're going to use one of the predefined templates as part of Elementor. So just as a quick way of doing it, but if you wanted to create this from scratch, using all the normal tools inside Elementor and Elementor Pro, you can do just that. However, let's just keep this really simple and just choose a nice simple header. So we'll use this one and we'll say insert. That will then insert that into our page, and you can see it's now looking for a logo image and for our menus. We're not going to worry too much about that in a moment. We'll just hit publish. Add our conditions. So again, you can see it's all just repetitive. It's doing the same thing, setting the right conditions and so on. Entire site is perfectly fine, but again, you can see we can choose a different header for the entire site, for archives and for singular. We'll say entire site is perfectly fine and save and close. And that's now associated that header with every single page we create on our site. We'll do the same thing again. Now we'll exit out to our dashboard. Going to come in and we're going to say theme builder. And from there, we're going to say footer. And then say add new footer. So what we're going to do is come in and say default footer, create our template. We'll then choose our template we're going to use, the predefined template. And again, we'll just choose a nice dark simple layout. So we'll choose this one, insert that in. And then once we've done that, we'll hit publish, add our condition. Entire site is perfectly fine. Hit save and close, and we are now done. So let's come back, take a look, refresh this, and we'll have our new header at the top, and scroll down our new footer at the bottom. So all we need to do now is go and set up things like the menu you want to use in there, add the logo into your site, and just do any kind of fine tuning to make sure you've got plenty of space around the various different elements and everything is looking really good. So I've gone ahead, tweaked a few bits and pieces, put a logo in, put some navigation in, and just style things out a little bit tidier and neater. So as you can see, what we've ended up with now is a nice simple way of being able to go and take a look at these vehicles, take a look at the details about them, and style anything we want and add anything we want in there. So that's the basics of working with advanced custom fields. But what if you want to take this further? What kinds of things can you do? Because at the moment, we can associate these custom fields with things like posts and pages. And that's kind of still limiting. Well, what you could do, and I'm not going to cover this in this particular video, I've already covered this in other videos, and if you want another sort of beginner's guide to use these kinds of things, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll create a second video that'll show you how you can utilize these extra tools. But what you can do is you can use a free plugin called Custom Post Type UI. That will then allow you to create custom post types. So for example, instead of using the posts for your vehicles, you could create a custom post type for vehicles, and then you could have those two separated. You could also then create another custom post type for manufacturer information and have different information for each of the manufacturers there. There's a real lot of scope of what you can do, and I covered this recently in a deep dive video where we took a look at creating a food blog, which used custom post type, custom loops, and a whole range of really cool things to create a much more bespoke website. So if you are looking to take this to the next level again and just add in extra functionality, Custom Post Type UI is definitely one of the best options to take a look at. Anyway, there are lots of different ways you can take these skills and these topics that we've covered in this particular video, but this should give you a good beginner's grounding in how you can use advanced custom fields alongside WordPress and Elementor Pro. Well, there we go. That's the beginner's guide to using advanced custom fields and Elementor Pro to create more advanced WordPress websites. Hopefully you've got a lot out of this video and it's opened your eyes to some of the things that you can do with these fantastic tools. Now, if you did get something out of the video, let me know in the comment section below what you thought of it, what you learned from it, and how you think you can take this and your WordPress websites to the next level. Now, speaking of taking your WordPress websites to the next level, if you want to learn more about advanced custom fields, Elementor Pro, and all the kinds of great things you can do with these tools, take a look at the playlist that's listed in the description below and in the corner right now. That's going to open your eyes to even more opportunities, even more great things you can do with these great tools. As always, all the applicable links are in the description below. My name's been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.